Hey, I'm Courtney Waterman, your tutor. Lover of anime, manga, and math. And you just tuned into another session of Tutor Me Sempai. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're jumping into our 7th grade topic, adding and subtracting negative numbers. Now in this video, I'm not just going to show you how to add and subtract negative numbers. I'm actually going to show you how you've already been possibly doing this without even realizing it. Not only that, I'm going to whip out some zombies and show you how Dragon Ball Z gives us a very easy way to remember a shortcut to do this. So make sure you stay tuned all the way to the end to catch it all. If you're new to my channel, I'll be putting time codes in for this video in the description box below so you can skip ahead to whatever part of the video interests you the most. If you have any question about what you see here today, or even your own homework, remember, you can always put them in the comment box below or visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me all about it there. When you find this video helpful, remember to leave a like. It really helps the channel and I would greatly appreciate it. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share this video with a friend. Without further ado, let's talk about adding and subtracting some negative numbers. So like I said, before we get into actually adding and subtracting these negative numbers, I want to show you how you've already potentially been doing this without realizing it. So here are some real world examples that you may not have noticed you are adding negative numbers. Have you ever paid for something? You have added a negative number. Have you ever thought about getting on a diet at any point in time? Cutting back calories, maybe cutting back on some fats, cutting back on protein, whatever it is, have you ever thought of getting on a diet? Well, that is adding negative numbers. Without realizing it, you're adding negative numbers. Have you ever set up a schedule in which you have to plan out a day, a week, or even a month? Well, if you've ever set up a schedule, you have added negative numbers. Anytime you've done any form of subtraction, you're technically adding a negative number. So when you're making your schedule, you're essentially subtracting hours, available hours, from your time and allotting it to something else. So you no longer have that time available. When you're on your diet, you're counting your calories, or let's say you're doing a low carb diet, you're trying to subtract how much that you're currently eating. You're no longer eating that full amount. You have now added a negative into the equation. When you pay for anything, especially when it's just coming out of your bank and you don't see it anymore, you've definitely added a negative number. But even when you're trying to get your change back and you give, let's say, a cashier a certain amount of money and they're giving you money back, you are adding negative numbers. You're so used to doing that without even realizing it, but adding negative numbers is the same thing as just subtracting a number. So instead of doing 5 minus 3, you can, in fact, write this as 5 plus a negative 3. You're adding a negative number. These two things mean the same exact thing. So now you might be thinking, sure, I've added negative numbers before, but I don't think I've ever subtracted negative numbers. And I'm here to tell you that there's a very good possibility that you have indeed subtracted negative numbers as well. And to really figure out that point, I have one question for you. Have you ever made a mistake? Let me clarify. If you've ever made a mistake and tried to fix that mistake, you have concept-wise subtracted a negative. Let me show you what I mean with an example using one of my favorite games, Zombicide. So anyone who knows me knows I absolutely love this game. Zombicide is a really fun game in which you're pretty much hunting down zombies and trying to do these random objectives. But one key element to this Zombicide game is making sure you always have zombies to pull from. So we have an outside pool of zombies that we can add to our board. If we ever run out of zombies in our outside pool, bad things will happen. So let's say you and a bunch of friends were playing this new game that you've never really heard of, Zombicide. And it was your turn to now add zombies to the board. Now you have to make sure you're keeping up with how many zombies are in the outside pool. But because you are so new, you make a mistake. This is a card used to add zombies to the board. Now you can see here 5, 4, 4, and 0. This tells you how many zombies you're going to add if you were to pull this card. So let's say you did, but because you're so new, you got really excited and the first number you saw was 5. So you tell everybody we need to add 5 zombies to the board. So they take 5 zombies out of this pool and they add them to the board. So we no longer have any zombies in this pool. So if you were doing your regular math, right, you say 5 was our initial and we subtracted 5 from the pool, so we have 0 left in our pool. But you can also write that as 5 plus a negative 5, right? And we got our 0. So now that you have nothing in the pool, everyone is freaking out. So they want to make sure that what they took out actually needed to be taken out. So they go back and they look at your card. And they see that instead of that 5, you guys are not at that level yet. Your friend checks you and says, oh no, you made a mistake. We don't actually put anything out here because we're currently still at this lowest level. So now you have to fix your mistake because you don't want to have 0 zombies in your pool. So what are you going to do? You have to add the zombies back into the pool. They no longer should be on the board. They are supposed to be on the pool. You never should have taken them out the pool to begin with. So you could have easily just added it back. You originally have 0 now, right? Because you took them off. You made the mistake and you're trying to rectify your mistake. Undo that mistake so you add them back. And now you have a pool of 5. But what if I told you all you really did was negate the previous action? If you negate the previous action, you essentially subtract a negative. So you have your 0 currently, right? And you need to negate, undo what you just did. And what did you just do? Well, you just did a negative 5, right? You added that negative 5. You have to undo that. So you're going to subtract the negative 5. You're going to negate the previous action. So what happens if you negate the previous action? Don't worry about what this looks like. Think about it just from a game point of view. If you negate the previous action in which you took 5 away, if you're trying to undo that, technically you should end up with how many zombies in your pool? You should have 5. You negated it, so you undid everything you just did. So you're no longer taking anything away, so you have the 5 left. And you see that adding back is simply the same as negating your last action. So if you've ever made a mistake that you tried to fix, well, essentially concept-wise, you've negated that negative. You've subtracted a negative. But if you're not a board gamer, but you are a card player, have you ever heard of the game called Hearts? This is a game in which you actually want the least score, the lowest score possible in order to win the game. Well, let's say you accidentally subtract too much and you have to add back into your score. Or another person you're playing with subtracts too much from their score and they have to add it back. Well, you made a mistake and you subtracted a negative in order to fix that mistake. So if you've ever played a game like Hearts in which you're trying to have the lowest score and you technically subtract too much and you have to fix that mistake, you've subtracted a negative. But let's say you don't play any games. You're not a gamer. Have you ever bought something online and tried to cancel? So if you've ever canceled something online, but they still took the money out, well, that hurt, one, right? Because you say, hey, I didn't want to pay for this. But if they then reimbursed you that money, that's essentially subtracting the negative. They negated their action of taking the money out when they shouldn't have done that. So if you've ever paid for something, canceled, but the money still left and you had to be reimbursed later, if it hasn't happened yet, it may happen later. However, in that case, you have subtracted a negative. So now that I've shown you that you've potentially added and subtracted negatives in your everyday life without potentially realizing it, let's look at it from a mathematical point of view. So let's say you have 13 plus a negative 5. We've seen in our previous examples with the zombies that this is the same exact thing as 13 minus 5. So you already know how to handle that. You start at 13 and you go backwards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you end up at 8. So whenever you see plus this negative 5, realize all you're doing is this. That is this. That is this. So if you can do this, you can do that. So the one that might trip people up more is the subtracting of a negative. So when you're trying to do something like 13 minus a negative 5, what I really want you to think about is negating your mistake. This is currently where you are. This is what you previously did, and this is telling you to negate that. So concept-wise, if you're going to negate what you already did, which was subtracting, you should have something bigger than 13. So you should be going this way on your number line. So you took away too much. So you need to put it back. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you took away 5 to begin with, and that's how you got 13. And you're trying to negate that. You're trying to go back to what you previously had. Think about the pool of zombies. You took out too much and you're putting it back now. And now you're up 5 from where you currently are. Because now you reset things. So by doing that, you realize you are currently at 18 now. So this is going to be 18. And this is no different from this. So if you can do this, you can do that. So once again, when you're adding a negative, you're essentially just subtracting. That's all you're doing. If you're subtracting a negative, you're simply adding. That's all you're doing. So if you can remember these relationships, you are golden. So how do we remember that this is supposed to equal this and this is supposed to equal this? Well, let's look to Dragon Ball Z to help us out here. Now I'm a longtime fan of Dragon Ball Z. That was my childhood. I grew up with it. I drew it. I did so much with Dragon Ball Z, and I will always have a spot in my heart for Dragon Ball Z. But when I realized that Dragon Ball Z can potentially help with math, I got even more excited. And how can Dragon Ball Z help with math? At least in this topic that we're talking about, the idea of fusion. Now, if you've never seen Dragon Ball Z, where have you been? But if you have and you are familiar with fusion, this is going to be the way you can easily remember your shortcut so you can go straight from having that negative, negative, or that negative, positive. So fusion, if you've never heard the word fusion, you're essentially combining two things that were once separate. In Dragon Ball Z, fusion was one of the ways you can easily power up to be a strong enemy. If you had two people who had relatively close, if not the same power level, you can essentially combine them into one more powerful person.
Whoa, it worked!
However, there were stipulations, there were rules. You had to be really close, if not exactly the same power level. If your power was very different, the fusion would not work. So Dragon Ball Z characters had to do a lot of training in order to make this work. Well, you don't have to do that much training, and you can still reap the benefits of this fusion. These are your different combinations of your plus and negatives. Let's say you have a plus on this side and a plus on this side, or a plus on this side and a negative on this side, or a negative, plus, or negative, negative. If you had to work with the rules of Dragon Ball Z, which one of these could fuse? Well, I'm looking at this top one, and you realize these are exactly the same, right? So these would be able to fuse. How about these? No, because they're not the same. So these are not going to be able to fuse. How about this? No, once again, they're not the same, so you can't fuse them. How about these? Yes, these are the same, so you can fuse those. So we've operated within the rules of Dragon Ball Z's fusion, but what's the outcome of our fusion? Are we going to get Gotenks like we just saw in this clip, or are we going to get something else? Whenever you fuse successfully, you're always going to get a positive. If you can successfully fuse, for our purposes, our math purposes, we're always going to get a positive. But if you fail, well, what's the opposite of positive? Negative. So, success, if you are successful in your fusion, you get a positive. If you fail, you get a negative. So, whenever you're dealing with mixed signs, they're not equal, the fusion balance is not there, you're going to fail, and the result is a negative. If you have two of the same signs, your power levels are relatively close, if not the same, you succeeded in your fusion and you get a positive. So let's say you have 5 plus a negative 3. And notice I keep putting my negatives in parentheses so that we don't get things confused. You see here, you have opposite signs. You don't have them the same. So their fusion is going to result in a negative. This is your 5 minus 3. So that's how you can easily remember what it's supposed to equal. Likewise, if you had 6 minus a negative 9, fuse them. What's your resulting sign? Plus. So that's 6 plus 9. They're the same, so they can fuse. Your success means you're getting a plus. Here's a quick little bonus shortcut for you if you didn't really understand the fusion one. Now, what do I mean by 2, 4 equals plus and 3 equals negative? Well, think about your two signs. If you have a plus and a plus, well, how many lines did I just write there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, if there's 4 lines, the result is going to be a plus. How about if it's a negative negative? How many lines did I write there? 1, 2. If it's 2 lines, the result is going to be a plus again. How about if I have a plus and a negative? How many lines did I write there? 1, 2, 3. That's going to result in a negative. And it didn't matter if you switched them because it's the same 3 lines going to result in that same negative. So if you're not a Dragon Ball Z fan and the fusion completely threw you for a loop, this is one simple way of just counting how many lines you're drawing. And if you can remember 2, 4 gives you a plus and 3 gives you a minus, then your resulting sign can easily be found no matter what. So how many lines? 1, 2. This is going to be a plus. How many lines? 1, 2, 3. This is going to be a minus. So I hope you're able to follow along with today's examples, our shortcuts, and even our real world scenarios in which you've already probably added and subtracted negatives. If you have any question about what you saw here today, remember, you can always put them in the comment box below or visit me on Facebook at Tutor Me Sempai and tell me about it there. If you haven't done so already, remember to leave a like. It really helps the channel and I really appreciate every time you do it. Before you go, be sure to hit the notification bell, smash the subscribe button, and share the video with a friend. Well, that's all the time I have for today. I'm really hoping this helped with your homework and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Courtney and this is another session of Tutor Me Sempai.